So it's getting very interesting time by time. We have learned many things. We are able to now add components, and we can move components. We can intercept the tabs on the screen, and we are now able to move our component to the target position. So whenever I click the current position of the rectangle component actually moves to the target position, towards the target position, and then stops there. Okay, but it seems a bit weird. So what if we change the angle of this rectangle component? So whenever I click, whenever I tap, wouldn't be that nice that it will rotate, I mean the face or the top of this rectangle component. We have put this little circle here to indicate the top or the front of this component. So when it moves to a certain point, what if we rotate first this component towards the target position, and then it will move to the corresponding target, or towards the target, and then stop. So how to do this? And to do so, we don't have to do a lot of mathematics or calculations, because Frame actually provides a very convenient method to do so, to change the angle towards the target position. So what you can do is we can add a single line of code, either inside on tap down method or inside our myRectangle component class, or inside this move to target. So I'm going to write that single line of code inside on tap down, because we have now a reference of our myRectangle components. So before we call this move to target that actually triggers the movement or shift of this component, we will change the angle of this MRC to the point, I mean to the target point. And it's very easy. And what you can do is we can say MRC, then we can call a special method called look at. And you see that it requires a target vector or a position. Okay, so we can simply say that event dot local position. We are simply passing the local position or the tap position inside as a parameter of this look at function. So it will automatically rotate our myRectangle component towards the target position. And if I now run this, then you see whenever I click, it will point to the target position, then it starts moving. And at the point of target point, it will stop. If I click here, so immediately we are seeing the change in angle. So here and there, now it looks very interesting, right? So it's like it's following our mouse cursor or tap position. You can increase the speed if you want, if you think it's too much slow. But with the help of this function look at, we are simply rotating our component. So if I put our cursor at look at function, it says this method sets the angle so that the component's orientation vector is pointing at the target. Okay, so this is one way to do that. We have another thing, we have another method similar to look at, which is angle to. We can do so, but in case of angle to method, if we use that, then we have to add the angle to the component's angle, or the change or shift or the offset, how much it has to rotate. We have to add it manually to the component's angle. For example, let's say if I disable this line and go inside our myRectangle component, so before we calculate the direction, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say there is another method which is angle to, and it also requires the target. So angle to method, if I click this, so this angle to method, what it does, so it returns the angle. So this method is actually returning another angle. So this angle is actually the shift or the necessary angle that needs to be corrected or needs to be added to the original angle. Okay, and this look at method that we did earlier or used earlier, this method is actually using this angle to method internally, and you see how it is changing the actual angle of the component by adding the offset angle or the necessary angle that requires to rotate to the target position. So inside our my rectangle component, we need to do that. Maybe inside our update method, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe what we need to do. Okay, we don't need to add this to our inside our update method. What we need to do is we need to simply say angle and then plus equals this one. So we saw that this angle to method actually returns the angle, and then we need to add that angle to the current angle of this position or component. So if I now hit save and click, it will work in the same way. It will work in the same way, but this time we had to change the angle manually. Okay, so that's why I actually prefer to use the look at method, because it actually internally implements this angle to method. Okay, so I'm going to remove this from here, and here I'm going to enable this line one more time and restart, and now it is actually pointing to the direction and moving. So anywhere I tap, it is pointing first to that location or position, and then it is trying to move itself to that target position, and finally it stops when it reaches the threshold.